Good evening. Here we are again, Find Your Why Foundation, with the wise questions of the day. With myself, Dr. Cheryl Chapman, and with
me, Marion Bevington.
And I'm still in Yorkshire in the UK. And Marion, whereabouts are you in the world today?
I'm in very, very exotic, tropical Tufnell Park.
Welcome back to London. So yeah, Maz has flown in from Firenze to be with you this evening.
Oh, yes.
I hope you will. Now, Linda Webb was asking, was this last night? Have I missed it? I'd love to know the answer to this question. Let me just show this question. Hang on 2 ticks. So, where's the question? Yes, was this last night? I missed it. I'd love to know the answer to this question. I waste so much energy feeling guilty. So what is the question? Bit of a hint there, wasn't there, really? So the question tonight is, why do I feel guilty? Why do I feel guilty? So, Maz, what is guilt all around? What's it all about, Alfie?
Well, you feel guilty when you think you've done something wrong, yes. Basically. So guilt is the idea that your behaviour is out of whack, that you've gone against something that you believe in, that you've upset somebody, that you've treated someone badly, that you've intentionally created a problem of some kind, or that you just weren't honest. Guilt is it's a well-known Catholic phenomena. The Catholic Church thrives on it. So it's well known in my family.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Hello, Fawzia. Fawzia's joining us. Hello, Fawzia. She's just saying hi, Maz. Hi, Cheryl. And we've got Cheryl on the line as well, giving us little hearts. Thank you very much. Yeah, what's interesting is I read a fact that actually women feel more guilty than men. What about that then? And the reason is because I suppose you can go back in history, go back, to cavemen, cave women, because we're, kind of brought up to be community, collaborative, creative and look after other people. Then obviously if we feel like we've let somebody down, then immediately in comes the guilt. Or, we're kind of like brought up in a society of, don't say anything nasty about anybody, keep that all in. So we feel guilty if we've had a bit of a tit-tattle behind somebody's back as well.
We even feel guilty when people feel guilty about their thoughts. So it's not even when you do something. Sometimes people feel guilty because they're thinking bad things or they've got a negative idea that they haven't even expressed. So it goes beyond even, what you've actually done.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So hello, Cheryl Lewis. Now we've got Fawzia saying she can't see anything. So should make sure that we are actually on the show here before we go any further with myself and with Mazzy B. So do you want to just have a quick check on that, Maz, while we're just making sure that everyone can see us? So can everybody see us? Give us a little thumbs up or a little hearts if you can see us. That would be great. Because according to this, we're out there. We're on. So who's giving us some little thumbs up and some hearts? So we're talking about why is it? Why do we feel guilty? So we've already talked about the fact that, you can feel guilty about something you have done. You can feel guilty about something you haven't even done. Yes, so Fawzia can see it now. She's got a thumbs up going on here now, which is fabulous. But
the other thing I think that's important to understand about guilt as well, because there's a lot of people confuse guilt and shame. They're really close ideas. But actually, with guilt is that you feel like something that you've done is bad, whereas shame is that you're a bad person. And sometimes, especially with Catholicism, the idea of guilt is like bandied about everywhere, but it actually creates shame. And then shame is really it's like a trauma, shame. It completely changes the way you think about yourself. And I think, is it Brené Brown? I love Brené Brown. She talks about shame all the time. And what I love about, she said something around, shame is when you feel like you're a bad person, and guilt is when you feel like you've done something wrong. But actually, guilt is like the opposite of shame in a way, because you can do something about it. Because when you've done something bad, it's a lesson. It's like when you've made a mistake, it's a lesson. And so if you didn't ever make any mistakes or you didn't ever do anything bad, then you wouldn't actually ever learn anything. So it's really useful if you understand guilt as the thing that you did, you could do differently next time, you could do better next time. And so it's a way of learning about how to step into what makes you feel good about yourself. So rather than, who was it? It was Linda, wasn't it? Linda Webb. Rather than being wrecked by the guilt, which means you're judging the past negatively, you can look at the past and say, well, wow, what a great opportunity. Now I know how to do something better. Now I know how to make myself feel better, because I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do it differently next time. Or if you did do it again, there's just understanding that it's the judgments that's the problem. And when we're in judgment, we're not actually learning anything, because judgment is like you make conclusions in judgment, which means you draw defined lines and you're in a box. Basically, you put yourself in a little box, and there's no, when you're stuck in a box, there's no way out. So guilt can throw you in a box. Judgment throws you in a box because it makes things good or bad. So you're going to be one end of the polarity. Well, life is about the whole of the whole thing. It's both sides of the coin. So guilt is, when you can reframe it into, this is a really great opportunity for me to learn how to do it better.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a couple of other ladies joining us here. So we've got Fawzia, who now here is, and Cheryl. We've got Heidi joining us. Hello, lovelies. Thank you for taking your time out. Hopefully Linda will be joining us, or she'll see the reply. So basically, the question that we're asking tonight is, why do I feel guilty? And we know, traditionally that women feel more guilty than men. It's kind of like a common thing in women because of the community spirit that we're supposedly brought up in. Don't say anything bad about your family. Don't say anything bad about your friends. If they ask you, does my bum look big in this, you've got to say no. Old-fashioned approaches. And then, of course, you can feel guilty about something that you've done or you've thought, as Maz said, you haven't even done anything, you feel guilty as well. So I suppose the question is, if we know that this guilt is around, if we know that it's a little bit more prominent in a woman as opposed to a man, I mean, man can still feel guilty, of course. It just seems to be a bit of a bigger trait in women. We know that you can be indoctrinated into feeling guilty, with lots of religions as well. Then I suppose the question is, what can you do about it? So if you're feeling guilty, what is it that you can do, to basically, do something about it? So let's just have a quick look here. So Fawzia is sharing with us here, I used to feel guilty losing my mum, which is an interesting thought, isn't it? Because, because she didn't understand. She's just another one here, because I used to feel when my dad wasn't talking to me and my siblings. So obviously that's, her feeling guilty, taking on somebody else's pain, probably.
Yeah, so she wasn't behaving in a way that would make her dad feel better. Yeah.
And then there's Cheryl saying, I used to feel guilty for studying when my son was young. So there's lots of different types of guilt that come out. So what can you do about it if you feel guilty? I suppose the first thing is to recognise it, to be aware. We talk a lot about awareness, don't we?
Yeah.
What else in terms of, so you're getting this feeling of guilt, you've recognised it. So what is it that you can do to make things better?
Well, if it's about something that you have or haven't done for somebody else, you acknowledge it and you tell the person what you've done or you haven't done. Mm-hmm. And in doing that, just by acknowledging it and just by naming it, by labelling it, that's like, it's on the way to sorting it out, isn't it? Because if the other person wants you to do something or doesn't, then you can negotiate with them, and you can ask for, the other thing you can do is apologise. You can ask for forgiveness, but the biggest part of guilt is actually self-forgiveness. Mm-hmm. It's about understanding that we all do our best in every moment. Even a psychopathic murderer, as he's killing somebody, he's actually only ever doing his best in that moment. When we've got really scrambled brains, and most of us have, when our minds are really scrambled, we do really weird things. But people, I don't believe that anybody is bad on the inside. I believe we get shit layered around us, and sometimes we act like shit because we've got so much shit, like the burden of the shit on us means that we behave that way. And so understanding that even when you've done something that you think is bad, the moment when you were doing it, you were actually behaving in a way that there was part of you that was serving yourself. So, for example, when I was a kid, I remember taking money to buy sweets at school. And the reason why I did it was because I was jealous because all the other kids had sweets. And I felt like they'd think I was the poor kid, or they'd label me in some way that would mean that I would get rejected. Now, my core wound is rejection. So what I was trying to do was I was actually trying to save myself from rejection. And I mean, that sounds like a really daft story now, doesn't it? But when you're 7 or you're 8 and you're perceiving that your circumstances are so different that you're being separated from your tribe, you're going to do anything you can to bring yourself back to the tribe. So I understand now that that little 7-year-old was actually trying to make herself feel safe. She was trying to stay connected. And the way that she saw she could do that was to have the same sweets that the other kids had when they went to school. Makes a lot of sense when you're 7.
Yes, it does. Yes. Yeah, it does. It does. Interesting enough, and, I don't know, we've talked about this, sort of like, the last few days, I feel guilty over Aussie Dog, this last week. So, in a moment I made a decision. I made the decision because, I'd had to carry him, 3 times on a walk. I'd made the decision because when I came home, he was kind of comatose with the, with the tramadol. And also, I sort of felt a bit guilty, leaving him with other people when I was going away. And so in the moment that I made the decision, that, the time had come to say goodbye, if you like, everything felt really clear. At the time it was like, he's not really being a dog. He's trying to do the things that he can't do anymore. It's not going to get any better. And all the kind of rational things, that go on in the head before you make a decision, felt very logical at the time. And then, I'm driving to the vets. I'm feeling the guilt's starting to come in then, and I'm starting to have second thoughts. I'm thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Brain's kicking into overdrive. We go into the vets. Of course, he walks into the vets perfectly well, as if there's absolutely fuck all wrong with him. And then those few moments, if you've ever, had to put a pet to sleep, or if you've ever chosen to put a pet to sleep, there's few moments while they're putting the drip in, there's loads of thick stuff going on in my head. Is this the right thing? Is it not the right thing? I didn't really want to ask anybody else because I knew that, it would be a big ask, really. So I knew I had to make the decision. And, of course, I was with him to the end, and I was glad that I was. But for the hours that after that, when I felt in absolute despair, I felt really guilty because I kept thinking, well, he could have had a few more months, he could have had a few more days, I don't know. He could have had this, he could have had that. And all this kind of like downward spiral of, guilt and like of questioning myself, really. And so I suppose, what I did was I did the only thing that felt right for me at the time, which is I took myself away from the situation. I did, for some people, flying out to Doha, probably a bit extreme. But what you can do is you can take yourself away from where that guilt is, if you like, spatially, if you like, because the guilt I felt was, yes, of course, it was in my head, but actually it felt like it was around the house because that's where we'd spent the afternoon, getting in the car, there was all this kind of like linkage. So I took myself away from the place spatially so I could actually look at it from a distance. And I'll admit there's still a bit of the guilt there. I can still say.
I think though, Cheryl, you've been really hard on yourself because there's a lot more going on than guilt with this, isn't there? There's the grief as well. So there's the part of you that's grieving and has this big loss that then recognises the loss and the grief, and it's like that part of you is blaming the part that made the decision. And when you say about you went to Doha, I think what you did there as well was you faced the music because you had to face Chippy, knowing that you'd made the decision and you'd taken the action and you'd been the one who'd done all of that. And then you've gone with all of your grief and all of this guilt and all of this loss to him, and he's in grief and he's in loss. So it's almost like you're getting a double whammy of blame from him and from you, even though he might not have done that. I'm sure in your mind you would have, there would have, because of that was going on, this part of you that was feeling the loss would be like really attacking the other part of you. So I think I do think you're being quite hard on yourself, and you're going to be grieving for a while, aren't you? Because this grief it comes in waves, doesn't it? It's not something that.
I mean, in any kind of grief.
grief and the guilt, I think, are at the moment, they're going to be so entangled. It would be really difficult for you. So this is really good advice for everybody out there as well, because if there is a really high emotion around loss or grief, and there's guilt as well, you've really got to be so much more easy with yourself. You've got to be so much more forgiving and understand that this inner battle is there because of the way that grief and loss drop as often. They're trying to find an outlet, so they'll try and find blame. And they're going to blame that part of you, and that's where the guilt then starts. It's a really complicated process that you're in at the moment. And I think you're very brave for sharing it. Just a few days after it's happened as well. But it is really lovely that we can share this with everybody that's listening or watching, because it is so important that we can heal grief with forgiveness. Sorry, we can heal guilt with forgiveness. But while you're in grief and while you're in loss, it is going to feel, I think, a bit more tricky.
Yeah, I think that, the benefit of taking away, and this is really my advice, and any advice that I'm giving is because I've used it, because it's either worked for me, it's served for me, whatever. So for the first thing for me was I took myself away from the place spatially. Now, that could have been that I could have gone, for a drive to the seaside. I could have gone for a walk in the park. Whatever that might be. You don't always necessarily have to hop on a flight. An 8-hour flight to get away from it. Yeah. And I went because, of course, yes, I wanted to be around somebody that could support me. And you're right. Maybe I felt like I had to face the music and say to I'm really sorry that I made the decision, if you like. So that's kind of like asking for forgiveness or just owning up to it or whatever. I didn't really need to do that because you already knew that. But then what I had like 2 or 3 days, where I just had time to really reflect on it and to just kind of look at it in quite a black and white way, which is, okay, this was the reality. This is the reason why I did this. Would I have changed it moving forward? Well, possibly I would have done. But eventually, inevitably, it wasn't going to change because he wasn't going to get better. So I came to a place of peace with that, really. So, if you're feeling guilty about something, then you can come to a place of peace with it. But actually, the other bit is that, I kind of logically and emotionally went through, what was right, what was wrong, if you want to use that word. I kind of went through that process. And then it is a case of, okay, so now I know that I did make the right decision in the long term. And also the benefit. This sounds a really strange way to probably describe it. What was the benefit of making that decision? What was the benefit of taking that action that I felt guilty about? Yeah. And there were so many, positives out of it, so that, in the fact that, he wasn't trying to walk up the street with 2 legs because the other 2 legs were dragging behind him anymore. He wasn't, stepping in his own shit and other dog shit. There's all these things as well. So when I took myself away from it, I could really look at that situation. And also, it kind of made me, have a bit of a light bulb moment, if you like, in the fact that, I didn't realise how hard it would hit me. So, yes, I am human. And also it's like really interesting to just watch what does go on in the mind. So, the first thing is, yes, you can look at the situation logically, because we do have a tendency to, make it into an EastEnders thing. I made a decision in the moment. It was the right decision at the time. Yes, of course, losing anybody or making a decision that affects somebody else is bound to have some effect on you. But, deep down, I know I made the right decision with love, because I'd looked after him for 14 years. So it wasn't the fact that, I just decided, here's a really well-fit dog and I'm just going to, take it to the vets and inject it. It wasn't really come from that sort of place. But the other thing that's interesting is, what can I have gratitude for? Well, I can have gratitude for the fact that I had him for 14 years. So if you've made a decision and you're feeling guilty, what are the positives, that you personally have done? Because, of course, the guilt is just on you as an individual. That's a big, cross to bear, really, in terms of that. What else have we got here? So Fawzi is saying, it's so interesting about self-forgiveness. No one tells you about self-love. That's right, so I took myself away to have a bit of self-love, really. And a bit of love from the husband as well. But anyway, it's a whole new broadcast, that one. But, just have some time together. And of course, you know, you can then look at the situation, and also, you know, I'm very grateful for the amount of people that were there to support me, to help me. Do you know what I mean? That really cared. You know, you could just really see that. That was very interesting at the same time. So, what else can you do? So you can have a look at yourself. You can, you know, have gratitude. And the thing with people, I find, is that, you know, when people like try and put their guilt on you, or they try to blame you, because that's what it is. I think guilt can sometimes come from different places, such as anger, frustration. You know, so people try and blame you. Maz, we had a fabulous example when you came here. So me and Dr. Jill Barham were sitting around the dining table with Marion, and we just finished our dinner, hadn't we? And it was like, oh, do you think you could just pass the fruit box? I think the words were, can you just pass an orange or a pear? I can't remember, a piece of fruit. Marion leans over, grabs hold of the fruit bowl, and this fruit bowl's on a stand, like a glass stand, which I know it's not connected. So Marion's pulling the top of the fruit bowl as the stand is sliding off the sideboard, and I can see that the stand's going to smash on the floor. And I'm like, whoa, no! And it's too late, of course, and the glass is smashed on the floor. And me and Jill immediately go, ah! You know, like we're expecting Marion to go, oh, sorry for that, sorry for that. And she didn't say sorry. And there was a bit of me that was like, you just smashed the fucking fruit bowl. Like, what? Where's the fucking sorry? You know, so I'm immediately thinking that she should be feeling guilty. And then she just said, no, you're okay. I'm all right. And it was just in that moment that I actually thought, do you know what? She's absolutely bloody right. And it's only a fucking piece of glass. You know, so, you know, we do, you know, I mean, Brits as well. Like, how many times do you say sorry when someone fucking walks in front of you?
There's also there's a way to apologise, which means that you don't pull yourself into shame as well, which is really good. It's a really good point, because you're acknowledging that what's happened is impacted somebody, and you can apologise and say, I'm really sorry that you've been impacted in this way. So, you know, if somebody's angry, or if somebody's hurt, or if something, I'm really sorry that you're angry, or I'm really sorry you're frustrated, or but it's not, I'm really sorry because I'm an idiot, or I'm not really, you know, I'm not saying I'm sorry because I've done something. I'm just sorry that you're in the state that you're in, because I wouldn't have wished that on you, and it was never my intention to do that. So when you've done something that you don't believe was the wrong thing, or you're guilty because of the way another person has reacted, then you can apologise for what's happening to them, for what their reaction is, because you don't have to own when somebody else is disappointed. You know, if you're disappointed, that's often what guilt is about, isn't it? It's a self-disappointment. That's where guilt can come. So understanding that you can apologise to other people, because it was never my intention to upset you. I'm really sorry that you're upset about this thing that I've done. But I'm not sorry that I did it, because I never did it with a bad intention.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think you said, you know,
separate the shame and the guilt as well, because the shame is, I'm bad, I did something, and now you feel really bad. So that's another way. And I didn't learn that until I was in my 30s. I remember it happened with my mum. And she sort of, well, I was doing something that she didn't like, but it's something that I do all the time. And it was like, I'm really sorry that you're upset, but I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing, and just make sure that you're not around. Do you know, it was really daft, but there was just this thing. I don't want to apologise for being me, and then I realised, oh no, I don't have to apologise for being me. I didn't mean to upset her. That was never my intention, and that's never been the purpose of doing it. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment about how to resolve guilt.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, you know, we've got Cheryl here saying that she says, you know, I say it automatically sometimes, even when I try not to, as in saying sorry. And Fawzi is saying, you know, I also say sorry automatically. You know, I just say it. And it is because I think that we really just have this kind of, you know, mentality of like, you know, you just have to say sorry for everything. Well, you know, bloody hell, God, if we're responsible for everything in the world, like we'd be the creator of the world, wouldn't we? You know, we're not that powerful to be responsible for everybody else's emotions, feelings, or whatever. The whole sorry thing, I think it's a Christian culture, and it's the weight of guilt, and because you're carrying the weight of guilt around all the time. You're feeling like you are sorry all the time, because this guilt is just like hangs around. You're in the field of it, if you like. It's hanging around you. But I do think it's kind of a Christian culture thing, and because English culture is based on Christian culture, I think that's where it comes from. Do you know what they say? The first words that come out of your mouth in Catholic Mass, forgive me, Lord, I'm a sinner.
that they are the first things that you say when you're part of the mass as the congregation. I remember the last time I was in a church and there was mass, and I said to the little 4-year-old next to me, "It's all right, you're not really a sinner." But he had a candle in his hand and he was so shocked he burned himself with the candle.
And then did you feel guilty?
No, not at all. It made me laugh. No,
but it was okay, I'm sure.
Actually, yeah. But it's just like the very... I went to church as a kid for quite a few years. But to say that, you know, to label yourself as a guilty sinner, first things that come out of your mouth every Sunday morning when everybody's like, it's crazy. So that's why I think this Christian culture and this weight of guilt that Christianity is dumped upon us, is I do think that's why we do apologise so much as English people.
Cheryl Lewis has got the best one. I walked into a lamppost once and even apologised to that. That's classic.
No,
sorry.
I think for that what to do about guilt. First, so we were saying, weren't we? First of all, it's to name it. Yeah. So to own it. If you have done something that you do feel bad about, it's okay to admit it, to say it, and then to make amends. To if you want to, you know, so the way out, so apologising by saying, "I'm sorry, you feel bad," or "I'm sorry, I did this." Look at where is it that you really can make amends, and that you can do something different, and that you want to do something different. And that's where you need to focus your attention, because then you've got the lesson and you can be grateful that you've got a lesson, so that next time something happens, you're in control of not feeling guilty.
Yeah. And also, you know, if someone's trying to put a bit of guilt on you, you know, you can kind of look at it and go, well, maybe that's coming from fear, you know, frustration, anger, whatever it is. You know, and if you are in the same room as somebody when they're, you know, trying to put their guilt on you, when you're like, actually, you know, that wasn't my intention, like you said, or like, actually, I don't think this has anything to do with me.
Yeah. You don't even have to say it's nothing to do with you. Just by saying that was not my intention. My intention was to, I don't know, like a fire.
I'm talking specifically here when someone's trying to put their guilt on you.
Yeah. You
know, it literally is nothing to do with you. Like, you've walked in and it's kind of like, you know, I'm having a shit day and nobody's been to see me and blah, blah, blah. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on, you know, and I've been on my own all day. And then, you know, because immediately you feel like, oh, I'm really sorry. You know, I'm sorry for that. Oh, I would have come round earlier if I'd known about it. Well, you wouldn't, because you didn't. You know, like, you know, if someone's trying to put that on you, then it is kind of like, have I done anything wrong? No, actually, I'm stood here right now. I'm doing nothing wrong. This isn't my shit. It is this other person's. You know, you can. You know, so the question is it your guilt? Is it something that, you know, you have done in terms of, like you said, you know, that you have literally done something and, you know that it's been the wrong thing? Or is it something that, as you said, has come, you know, by proxy, I was going to say, that's come out of something that you were doing. So your intention wasn't to do that. Yeah. So it is, again, you know, stepping back, taking time to look at it and just becoming aware of the fact that, you know, this is how you're feeling. But why is it that you're feeling? Is it because it's an automatic response, or is it actually in that moment that, you've actually, you know, like got to do with something?
Did you do something where you were thinking, why on earth did I do that? But again, that takes me back to that idea when I was, you know, I stole money to not be rejected. So there's always, and because we do get triggered into old, young behavioural patterns when we are triggered sometimes, we do act like a 2-year-old. But there's a reason for it, and there's an explanation for it, and there's a way to heal and change it. So there's no reason to be guilty about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, firstly, if it's your guilt, admit. I was going to say beg forgiveness, but of course that'd just be like being back in the church, wouldn't it? Yeah. Cheryl's saying she's getting good at recognising feelings and not accepting other people's feelings. It is very powerful, Cheryl, you're absolutely right. Because when you're aware of what's happening, you know, particularly in those sort of conversations. I mean, I ever think if someone's trying to put a bit of guilt on you, or if they're blaming you, you know, it's a little bit like if you were stood in a room and it started to fill with cyanide gas, what would you do? Well, you'd get the fuck out of it, wouldn't you? So ultimately, you don't have to hang around if people are trying to put their guilt on you. Good stuff. Anything else that we can share before we leave on our little quick wise question of the day?
From me?
Yes, from you, Marion.
Well, I think, just forgiveness and self-love. Self-forgiveness and self-love are really important, because even if somebody else is holding a grudge, it's like that thing that, what was it, Nelson Mandela said, being angry about, being resentful is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
And the other thing actually that I thought of just then when you were talking was karma. People think, oh, you've done something bad, it's like bad karma. Well, the way to correct bad karma is to acknowledge, accept and reverse what you've done, or to, make amends of what you've done. So karma was, I thought that was actually a way of looking at it from an old, not religious, but an old belief traditional way of looking at it in a belief system. That with karma, it's something that we do with choice. So again, accepting that sometimes when we've done something daft, we weren't actually in a place of choice. We were in a place where we had limited resources because we were regressed to the 2-year-old who doesn't want to be rejected. So be nice to yourself, be kind to yourself, and be curious about what the hell is going on.
Fabulous. And on that note, let's say thank you very much for joining us, ladies. Thank you for your comments. If you're watching the recording, please join in the comments below and we can come back to you if you've got any more questions. And so tomorrow we have another why question. And so keep an eye out for what that question's going to be. So it's good night from her.
And it's good night from me.
Good night. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.